Hello, everyone. In this session, we will focus on one of the most important administrative components of the system, which is role management. The agenda of today's session is overview of role management and its importance in ERP system, introduction to the role screen and its key functionalities, process of creating, modifying, and managing user roles, understanding how roles control access to ERP modules and actions, best practices and guidelines for effective role configuration. And the next one is objective. You will have a clear understanding of the purpose and functionality of the role screen in the ERP system. You will learn how to create, modify, and manage roles within the system, and gain insight into how roles control access to different ERP modules and actions. There are some prerequisites that need to be taken care of before going into this training session. You must have valid URL with admin credentials to initiate the role creation process. A well-defined organizational structure and responsibilities are required, based on which the roles will be created and assigned. User and organization configuration should be completed. Let's understand a general definition of a role in any ERP system. A role defines what a user can access and what actions they can perform in the ERP system. Roles group permissions logically by job function. For example, sales executive or inventory manager. Users are assigned one or more roles to ensure they can do their job without accessing unnecessary parts of the system. For example, with the role name sales executive as part of access rights, this role will be able to view and create sales order and delivery order. Let's visualize how the roles, their access, and permissions are handled within the Onfinity ERP. Let's log in with admin role on the Onfinity ERP. There are multiple ways to open the screen. You can either follow the menu path by clicking System Administration, and then under Security, you will find a role screen, or you can type directly Role into the search utility, which is available in the menu, and the system will bring out the exact screen for your selection. Here you can see a list of all existing roles and their name, user level, status, etc. To open the detail view, you can click the hyperlink on the name. To return to the detail view, click the back button. The role screen is typically used to create or modify role settings and review their access details, such as which users have been assigned to the role, and which processes, windows, forms, and widgets are accessible to it. To add a new role, click on the New Record button. You will be prompted to enter the following details. The organization will be auto-populated as per login settings, but it can be changed as per the requirement. The next one is the name field. The name of the role should clearly reflect its purpose or the type of work it's related to. For example, if the role is responsible for handling sales activities, you can name it as Sales Executive. Giving meaningful names like this makes it easier for users and administrators to understand what each role is meant for. The next field is User Level. The user level determines if the user of this role will have access to system-level data, organizational-level data, client-level data, or both client and organizational level. We will set this for now as client and organization for this role. And the next field is description. You can provide a description that gives brief information about this role. This role contains access to all the screens, forms, and processes related to the sales management module. It is optional. The administrator checkbox plays a critical role in defining the level of access granted to the user role within the Onfinity system. When this checkbox is selected, it designates the role as an administrative role. When creating a new role, enable the administrator checkbox to designate it as an administrator role. If the role is marked as an administrator, you don't need to manually assign permission while installing modules from the Onfinity market. The system will automatically grant access to all components of the installed module, such as screen, process, forms, and more. Since we are creating specific roles based on business operation, we will mark the role as manual. This option allows us to assign access manually, ensuring that only the required and relevant permissions are granted to the role. If we keep the manual checkbox unchecked, then on Create this role, the system will automatically grant access to all components available in the system, like all screens, processes, forms, workflow, etc., to this role. The active checkbox allows this role to be available for assignment or active role, and if you ever need to deactivate the role, simply uncheck the active box and save the changes. Under this workflow field group, you can manage information related to document approvals, whether they are for purchase or sales transactions within the defined amount limits. The currency field specifies the currency type, and the approval amount defines the threshold limit for document approval. If a document exceeds the defined amount, it will automatically be sent to the user's supervisor for approval as configured in the user management screen. The supervisor field indicates who will be used for forwarding and escalating issues or approvals. And the next one is Approve Own Document. If a role is configured as part of the approval process in any workflow, the user assigned to that role will be eligible to approve records. If the user needs to approve their own record, the Approve Own Document checkbox must be enabled. This checkbox allows the system to permit self-approval. If it is not enabled, the system will restrict the user from approving records they have created themselves. And the next one is Auto Approve. If a role has the Auto Approve checkbox enabled, it means the system will automatically approve records in certain conditions. Specifically, if this role is part of the approval process in any workflow, and currently only one user is assigned to the role who is creating the record, then the system will auto-approve it. This eliminates the need for the user to manually approve their own record. However, if more than one user is assigned to the role, the approval will follow the standard process, allowing the other users in the role to approve the record. And the next field is Menu Tree. The menu tree is maintained either at the tenant level or the role level. If the menu tree is defined at the role level, the system will prioritize it. Otherwise, it will fall back to the tenant level menu tree. A menu tree is used to list and organize the folders and path for screens, processes, and forms. If you want to create a specific menu for a particular role, Onfinity allows customization of a menu tree accordingly. Onfinity uses its own menu tree, which is configured through the Onfinity Menu Setup module. And the next field is Preference Level. Preference Level field helps you to define default values for the selection columns available on the screens. In Onfinity, a preference is a setting used to define default values or predefined behavior for fields. Preferences help users save time by autofilling commonly used values and ensuring consistency across the system. It auto-populates frequently used fields to reduce manual entry. A preference can be set in different levels, such as client, organization, user, or none, and the selected level determines who will receive the default value. In the preference option, you can create different combinations based on your requirement. If the preference level is set to client in the role screen, then any user who logs in with that role will be able to set default values at the client level. Consider the customer field in the sales order screen. Once the default value is configured, any user who logs in under the same client will be able to see the default values in the customer field on any screen where the customer field is available. For example, delivery order, AR invoice. Let's log in with sales executive role. Peter is having sales executive role access. Open the sales order screen. When the user clicks the preference option on the customer field, a pop-up will appear and display 4 checkboxes. Here is the default configuration if the preference level is set to client in the role screen. Tenant checkbox is marked and non-editable, and organization checkbox is not marked but editable. User contact checkbox is marked and editable, and Windows checkbox is marked and editable. If the organization checkbox has a true value, the default value will apply only to the selected organization on the record, which is Sonic Ventures. If the organization checkbox is false, the default value will apply to all organizations. Any user who accesses to the sales order screen and creates a new record in the organization that used in the preference level setting will automatically see the default customer value based on the setting. If the user checkbox is true, that the default value applies only to the login user who set the preference. If the user checkbox is false, the default value applies to all users who has access to the sales order screen. If the window checkbox is true, the default value applies only to the specific screen where the preference was set. In this case, this preference will be set to the sales order screen. If the window checkbox is false, the default value applies to all the screens where the same field exists, which is C_B partner_ID. Let's mark the organization checkbox true and click OK. A pop-up will appear and show the message Preference Value Set. It means when a user clicks New Record, the customer name, which is Green Energy Private Limited, will come automatically when the organization is Sonic Venture. If you want to delete the existing preference, select the preference and click the delete icon. A pop-up will appear and show Preference Value Deleted. Let's log in back to admin role. Open the role screen and select the role which you created. Here is the case, Sales Executive, and set the preference level as an organization, and save this record. Let's log in back with Sales Executive role. Open the sales order screen. If the preference level is set to organization in the role screen, in the value preference pop-up, tenant is marked and non-editable, and organization is also marked and non-editable. User contact checkbox is marked and editable, and window checkbox is marked and editable. To control or restrict the scope of the preference, you can adjust these user and window checkboxes accordingly. It will be working the same way as we discussed earlier. Only difference is that user cannot set default values beyond the selected organization on record. Let's log in back to admin role. Open the role screen and select the role, and to set the preference level as user, and save this record. Let's log in back to Sales Executive role. Open a sales order screen. If the preference level is set to user in the role screen, in the value preference pop-up, tenant is marked and non-editable, and organization is marked and non-editable, and user is also marked and non-editable. All checkboxes are non-editable except the window checkbox. User can only restrict the scope of default value preference for current screen or all screens. Let's log in back with admin role. Open a role screen and select the role, and set the preference level as none, and save this record. Let's log in back with Sales Executive role. Open a sales order screen. If the preference level is set to none in the role screen, then a user login with that role cannot set any value preference. The preference option will not display for any field. Preference is not available. Let's log in back to the admin role. Open a role screen and select your role. To enable audit trail for this role, simply mark the Maintain Changelog checkbox as true. This ensures that all changes made by user under this role are tracked in the system. Important point to be noted down here: changelog tracking will only display if the preference level is set to client on the role linked with the login user, and save the changes. Let's log back into the Sales Executive role. Open the sales order screen. To view these changes, just click on the total number of selected record hyperlink at the bottom of the same screen. This will open a pop-up showing all the changelog information related to that record. The changelog displays details such as new value, old value, field name, user who made the change, date and time, etc. Let's log in back with the admin role. Open a role screen. Select the role. And the next is display field. The display field is used to define the UI display rules for tenant and organization fields throughout the system. It has a drop-down list. If set to always tenant and organization, both fields will be visible in every screen. If set to Only Organization, then only the organization field will be displayed across all screens when the user logs in with the respective role. If set to No Tenant nor Organization, it is used when the tenant has only one organization, making it unnecessary to display either field. This setting helps simplify the user interface based on the display field setting. Next, we have a Form Action field, which lists all the forms or pages available in the system based on the access. This field is useful when you want a specific form to appear automatically as soon as the user logs into the system with a specific role. And next, the Display Menu and Homepage checkbox works in correlation with the Form Action field. If there is a requirement for a role to not have access to the menu button, then Display Menu should be marked as true. Once this is enabled, when a user logs into the system, the form specified in the field will open by default for that role. And the next checkbox is Show Accounting, which is related to the accounting tabs linked to the master screens. When this checkbox is marked as true, the user will be able to view and access the accounting tab in all the master screens where accounting tab is provided, as well as in other accounting-related screens. Let's see the quick impact of this checkbox in the customer master screen. Let's log in with Sales Executive role. Open a customer master screen. Here you can see the accounting-related tab. There is a separate section for linking accounting information. This section will only be accessible if the Show Accounting checkbox is marked as true for the respective role. Let's log in back with Admin role. Open the role screen. And the next one is Access All Orgs checkbox. In Onfinity ERP, there are several ways to define an organization access for a user. When a role is authorized to access all organization under a tenant, the Access All Organization checkbox should be marked as true. The next checkbox is Use User Org Access. If the access needs to be controlled at the user level, this checkbox should be marked as true. In that case, there is need to give access of a respective organization on the user screen. There is a separate detailed video on user management, where you can learn how to assign organization access to the users. Finally, if user wants to manage individual organization access, then there's a separate Child tab available, where the administrator can link the respective organizations. Let's quickly see how this can be done. Click the Navigation button. You'll notice several Child tabs that provide access to different types of information within the system. For this setup, select Organizational Access, and the system will take you to the Linking tab. We can give access to individual organization by clicking on New Record and selecting Authorized Organization for the role. With this setting like Read-Only or Read-Write permission, while Read-Only checkbox true, a user can view the configuration and transaction of the respective organization, whereas in Read-Only false, amendments of the records are allowed once everything is done. Let's move back to the Header tab. For the next checkboxes, Can Report and Can Export. These options are useful when a user needs to create a runtime report for any screen's data in the system. If the Can Report checkbox is marked as true, then users with this role will be able to view the information available on that screen in the form of reports. If the Can Export checkbox is also marked as true, they can extract or download those reports from the system in formats like CSV or PDF. For example, let's take the Product Master screen as a reference. Click on the menu and search for the Product Master screen. If the Can Report checkbox is marked as true for the role you are logged in with, you will be able to see the report icon on the respective screen. Click the report icon to view all the authorized information available for that screen. If the Can Export checkbox is also marked as true, you will be able to export the data in different formats such as PDF, CSV, etc. Click the respective export icon on the top right toolbar to download the data in the required format. The system will download the file with the specified format. Now let's head back to the role screen to explore the next set of functionalities. Personal lock and personal access are additional restrictions that can be applied to any master data records. For example, in a master screen like Payment Method, The invoice screen may display a drop-down list of available payment methods. To restrict certain values, such as cash or debit card, from appearing in the drop-down list for specific roles, you can use personal lock and personal access to control their visibility. When a user logs in with a role that has these restrictions applied, they will not see the cash and debit card options in the drop-down list on the invoice screen. Let's see how you can restrict the data for a master screen. First, you need to enable the personal lock and personal access checkboxes as true. Only then will the system display the personal lock and personal access icons in the action panel for the respective screen. Let's first enable these options for the Finance Manager role. Log in as Finance Manager and open the Payment Method screen. You can see the private record lock and record access icons in the right action panel once the feature is enabled in the role screen. Select the record and click the record access icon in the action panel. The system will open a pop-up window where you can select the role you want to restrict. In this case, the Sales Executive role. The pop-up will list a few checkboxes that define how you want to restrict the data. The Exclude checkbox default marked as true. So if you save this rule for the selected role Sales Executive, then this particular record will not visible to user logged in with role Sales Executive. Here, you should note this point. If you unmark the Exclude checkbox, the Sales Executive will see only the particular cash payment method in the Payment Method screen and will have access to this record only. If you mark the Read Only checkbox, that record cannot be edited. The next option is the Dependent Entity checkbox. Let us take another screen as an example to better understand how the Dependent Entity checkbox works. For example, assume there is a ChargeMaster record called Rent and open AR Receipt screen. And here is the AR receipt has been created against this rent charge. Now, if you mark the Dependent Entity checkbox as true for the Sales Executive role, users who log in with the Sales Executive role will not be able to see the rent charge in the charge screen, the AR receipts that are linked to the rent charge. Move to the ChargeMaster screen and select the rent charge, and click Record Access icon from the action panel, and select the role, the Sales Executive, and mark Dependent Entities checkbox as true, and click OK. Let's log in back with Sales Executive role, and Peter is having Sales Executive role access, and open a ChargeMaster screen. And you will not be able to see the rent as charge. And open a AR receipt screen. You will only be able to see payments created against other charges, except rent. Please note that you will also not see any AR receipts where the charge field is blank. It means if the AR receipt created against any invoices, those AR receipt also will not able to see here. If you want to view all AR receipts where the charge field is blank, you must enable the Show Null Values checkbox as well. Let's log in back with Admin role and open a ChargeMaster screen and select the record and click Record Access icon and mark Show Null Value checkbox as true. Generally, the Show Null Value and Dependent Entities checkboxes work in combination. If both Show Null Value and Dependent Entities are marked as true, you will be able to see all AR receipts where the charge field is blank and all AR receipts linked to charges other than rent. If you want to create restriction for other roles, click the plus icon to add more entries role-wise. If you want to delete any access role, click the delete icon. On the right side, you will find an arrow icon that allows you to navigate between saved access roles. Finally, click OK to save the changes. Let's log in back with Sales Executive role. Open the AR receipt screen. Now you will be able to see all AR receipt, where the charge field is blank, and all AR receipt linked to the charge other than the rent. Log in with Sales Executive role Open the sales order screen, click the new record, and see the payment method field. You are not able to see the cash as a payment method because you restrict the payment method for sales executive role. Let's log in back with the admin role. Open the role screen, select the role, and the next checkbox is Overwrite Price Limit. If you want to overwrite the price limit amount defined for each product during transaction, mark this option as true. When it is enabled, the system will ignore the warning message that appears if you exceed the price limit. The Overwrite Price Limit checkbox allows you to bypass the price limit restriction. If this checkbox is enabled for a role, users assigned to that role can enter any price, even below the defined price. For example, open a Product Master screen. Select the product. Move to the Product Price tab. The Overwrite Price Limit checkbox allows you to bypass the price limit restriction. You can see the price limit of this product is $300. When you log in with the sales executive role, if the Overwrite Price Limit option is set to true for this role, you will be allowed to enter a price below $300. The system will not display any warning message. To check this case, enable the Overwrite Price Limit checkbox for the sales executive role. Log in with sales executive role. Open the sales order screen. Let's log in back with admin role. Open the role window. Select a role. If the Overwrite Price Limit checkbox is false, and you enter a price below the limit, the system will display a pop-up message saying Under Price Limit. To test this case, set the Overwrite Price Limit checkbox as false, and save this record. Log in with Sales Executive. Open the sales order screen. Create a new sales order. Move to Order Line tab, and create an order line, and select a product. We have already set the limit price for this product in the Product Master screen, which is $300. If you enter below the $300, the system will open a pop-up message and it shows the under the limit price. It means the system will not allow you to enter a price below the limit price of this product. The next checkbox is Override Return Policy. This checkbox allows the user to bypass the return policy date restriction. For example, if a return rule is defined as 7 days, and this rule is assigned in the Customer Master screen, any return must be initiated within 7 days from the delivery movement date. If the return is created after the allowed period, the system will show an error message. Return policy timeframe has been exceeded when saving the customer RMA. How to override the return policy. When you log in with the role, if the Override Return Policy checkbox is set to true for this role, you will be allowed to create a customer RMA even after the return policy period has passed. The system will not display any warning message. To test this case, enable Override Return Policy checkbox true for the Sales Executive role. Log in with Sales Executive role. Open the sales order and delivery order. Let's take an example of this order, which is already created and completed. 50105. Delivery order against this sales order is 500086. The movement date for this delivery order is 30th December. And the customer for this order and the return rule for this customer is 7 days. Now create a customer RMA against this order. Open the customer RMA screen and click New Record. Select the original sales order. Select the delivery order against the sales order. And save this record. The system will allow you to save the record because you have a permission to overwrite the return policy, and the system will show the warning message, Return Policy Exit. If overwrite return policy is false, you are not able to save the customer RMA against the order. To check this case, set the overwrite return policy checkbox as false and save this record. Log in with Sales Executive role. Open the customer RMA. Create a new customer RMA against the order. And save this customer RMA. System will not allow you to save the record and will show the error message, return policy timeframe has been exceeded. And the next checkboxes are can create new attribute and can edit attribute. When these checkboxes set to true, it allows user with this role to manage product attributes while creating order lines. A separate video will be available that explains this functionality in detail. And the next checkbox is Check Document Action Access. It is used to restrict user from performing certain document action within the Onfinity system. For example, a sales executive may be allowed to prepare and complete a sales order, but should not be able to close it. Only a sales manager should have permission to perform the close action. When this checkbox is enabled, a Document Action Access tab becomes visible. This tab allows you to define which roles are permitted to perform specific action for each document type. To configure these restrictions, click on New Record under the Document Action Access tab, and link the permitted or restricted action based on the document type. This ensures proper role-based control and governance over document processing. And the next checkbox is Can Share Record with All. This checkbox allows records to be shared with users who don't have direct access to the particular organization. Normally, if a user doesn't have access to an organization, they cannot view its related records. However, by enabling this checkbox, specific records can be made visible to those users without granting them full organization-level access. A separate video will be available to demonstrate how this checkbox works and to explain its functionality in detail. And the next checkbox is Auto Data Marking. This checkbox enables a key functionality in Onfinity that helps streamline the transfer of configuration data between different environments, such as UAT, production, or other environments. When setting up a new instance or module, various configuration activities are typically performed. Repeating these configurations manually in each environment can be both time-consuming and errorful. Additionally, restoring a database from one environment to another may unintentionally carry over unwanted data. To address these challenges, Onfinity provides the Auto Data Marking feature. When this checkbox is enabled, configuration marked in the Configuration Link module can be exported from a source environment and imported into multiple destination environments. This ensures a consistent setup across all instances without the need for manual reconfiguration or full database restoration. A separate video will be available to demonstrate how this checkbox works and to explain its functionality in detail. Under Navigation, we have certain information that needs to be linked with this role to complete the access rights for the respective job role. The first option is to use the right configurator form for a faster and more seamless configuration process. A separate video will be available to demonstrate how the group rights and right configurator form work and to explain the functionality in detail. The second option is to navigate through the child tabs one by one and manually link the relevant Windows forms. We will try to access a few screens, processes, forms, and widgets manually by granting access through the respective sub-tabs. Click on the navigation button and select the Window Access tab. Then click on New Record. The organization and role fields will be auto-fetched from the Header tab. Next, select the screen. Since we are creating a sales executive role, let's assign a delivery order and AR invoice screen. If a user assigned to this role should only be able to view the screen, not edit it, keep the Read-Write checkbox unchecked. Otherwise, mark it as true and allow the user to view, edit, and create records in the respective screen. If you want to remove access to a screen, simply uncheck the active checkbox. Click on the home icon at the top left corner to return the role screen. Click on the navigation button and select the Process Access tab. Click on New Record. The organization and role field will be auto-fetched from the header tab. Next, select the process name. Since we are creating a sales executive role, let's assign a complete button of delivery order and AR invoice. If you want to remove access to a process, simply uncheck the active checkbox. Click on the home icon at the top left corner to return the role screen header tab. Click on the navigation button and select the Form Access tab. Then click New Record. The organization and role field will be auto-fetched from the header tab. Select the form name and save this record. Click on the home icon at the top left corner to return the role screen. Click on Navigation button and select the Widget Access tab. Click New Record. The organization and role fields are auto-fetched from the header tab. Select the widget name and save this record. The widgets are module-specific and can be assigned here. Click on the home icon at the top left corner to return the role screen. Click on the Navigation button. There are a few other tabs available as well. The Document Action Access tab, which we already covered in the early session, and the Workflow Access tab, which will be explained in the Workflow Management session. Click on the Navigation button and select the User Assignment tab. Click on New Record. The organization and role fields will be auto-fetched from the header tab, and the next field is User Contact. By default, the login username will come in the User Contact field. You can clear the information and select the respective users which you want to assign to the sales executive role, and save the changes. If you want to remove the user access to this role, simply uncheck the active checkbox. In case duplicate access is given in any of the tabs, the system will not allow you to save the record. It will display a message indicating that unique data is required, meaning the access has already been granted. This rule applies to all the child tabs available here. That concludes this session. Thank you for attending.